In OpenEdge table partitioning, two ways of creating a partition policy and partition policy details for a table are using the Database Administration Console and using the ABL API for table partition management. Even if you already know how to use the ABL API, it is recommended that you first use the Database Administration Console to create one partition policy and at least one partition policy detail. You then generate a partition policy program as a template that you can modify to create partition policies and partition policy details for other tables you want to partition using the ABL API. In this demonstration, we will show you how to create a partition policy and partition policy details using the Database Administration Console. Assume that we have created a new partition table, TP invoice, with a number of fields. We have also created a primary unique global index, invoice num global IDX, based on the invoice num field, and a local index, invoice date local IDX, based on the invoice date field. Now we are ready to create a partition policy, TP invoice, by range, and three associated partition policy details, TP invoice underscore 1999, TP invoice underscore 2009, and TP invoice underscore 2019 for the TP invoice table. We start by clicking Database Administration, Database Connections from the Database Administration Console. A new Database Administration tab appears, with the left pane showing the Sports Code database connection. We click the Sports Code database connection. The right pane displays 5 sections of information about the database, including the Storage Management section. From the Storage Management section, we click Create Partition Policy. The Create Table Partition Policy wizard appears. We enter TP invoice as the policy name. In the Database Connection field, we retain the database connection name. In the Table field, we click the search icon and select TP invoice from the Table Selection dialog box. For the default Data Area field, we click the search icon and select TP invoice data 1 as the storage area name from the Area Selection dialog box. For the default Index Area field, we select TP invoice index 1. For the default LOB area field, we select TP invoice data 1. We select Immediate Set New Partitions to Allocate Space as an object allocation rule, because we want to allocate space globally to the new partitions when we add them by adding partition policy details to the partition policy. Then we click Next. Since we partition by range, we select the Has Range checkbox. Note that if we were partitioning by list, we would simply skip this checkbox. In the Partition Fields area, we click Add Fields from Index and select Invoice Date Local IDX from the Index Selection dialog box. The Invoice Date field is added to the Partition Fields area. Notice that the Invoice Date Local IDX index is automatically added to the Partition Aligned Indexes area. This is the local partition aligned index we use to create this partition policy. We click Next, and then click Load Details. Note that there are no records in the table, because TP invoice is a new partition table. We click Finish to save the partition policy. The Table Partition Policies page appears. Next, we will create 3 partition policy details: TP invoice underscore 1999, TP invoice underscore 2009, and TP invoice underscore 2019 for the TP invoice partition policy. We click Edit Details in the Action column of the TP invoice partition policy to create partition policy details. The Edit Partition Policy Details page appears. We click Add to add a new partition policy detail. A new row is added to the Partition Policy Details table. In the Name Description column, we type TP invoice underscore 1999 as the partition name. In the Values column, we type 1999-12-31 as the upper bound of the partition. As a result, the predicate invoice date LE 1999-12-31 is used, which means that all invoice records whose invoice dates are less than or equal to this date will belong in this partition. Note that if we were partitioning by list, we would do the same thing here and specify a valid column value. The difference is that the predicate would use the comparison operator equals, which means that all records whose column values match the specified value would belong in the partition. Note also that since we selected Immediate Set New Partitions to allocate space as an object allocation rule when we defined the partition policy, the allocated checkbox is already selected. By default, for each partition, the data, index, and lob default areas are inherited from the parent partition policy. Here we will spread the partitions across different physical areas to help reduce disk I/O contention and enhance performance. We click the search icon and select TP Invoice Data 2 as the default data area field. Then we select TP Invoice Index 2 as the default index area field and TP Invoice Data 2 as the default lob area field. We click Update to apply the changes for this partition. We repeat these steps to create the remaining two partition policy details. Finally, we click Commit to save the partition policy details for the TP Invoice partition policy. We have now created a partition policy and partition policy details using the Database Administration Console. At this point, we can continue to use the Database Administration Console to add more partition policies and partition policy details. Or we can use the Database Administration Console to generate a partition policy program as a template that we can modify to create partition policies and partition policy details for other tables using the ABL API. You can learn about creating a partition policy and partition policy details using the ABL API in the next video. For more information about OpenEdge table partitioning, take the Implementing Progress OpenEdge Table Partitioning course.